with Chicago PD tomorrow at 10/9 Central on NBC.
2 News begins right now with breaking news.
At 6:37, he says something's wrong.
A news reporter relays the words of a condemned killer, Clayton Lockett, as a dramatic turn of events plays out at the state prison in McAllister. A planned double execution ends in failure as something goes wrong during the lethal injection.
The execution of Charles Warner is now on hold. 2 News reporter Max Resnick is live in McAllister with how this all went down. Max?
Department of Corrections officials tell us that Clayton Lockett died at 7:06 this evening after suffering a massive heart attack. They say he suffered that heart attack after the director of the DOC stopped the execution.
The execution began at 6:23.
The dozen reporters who witnessed the execution of Clayton Lockett returned to the media center more than 1 hour after the process began. They explained to those who did not witness the execution what just occurred.
He continued with slow blinks, heavy eyes. He laid still.
At 6:30, Lockett received his first check of consciousness. Media witnesses say he was still conscious. Robert Patton, director of the Department of Corrections, told reporters he was sedated. At 6:33, media witnesses say prison officials determined Lockett was unconscious.
At that time, we began pushing the second and third drugs in the protocol. There was some concern at that time that the drugs were not having the effect. So the doctor observed the line and determined that the line had blown.
That line, according to prison officials, was Lockett's vein.
At 6:37, he mumbles, something's wrong as he lifts his head and shoulders off the gurney.
Prison officials drew the blinds in the execution chamber at 6:39. Patton made the call to stop the execution.
After conferring with the warden, and unknown how much drugs had went into him, it was my decision at that time to stop the execution.
Patton then called the governor's and attorney general's offices to tell them he stopped the execution. He requested a 14-day stay of execution for Charles Warner, who was scheduled to die at 8 o'clock tonight. A prison official tells us that they didn't know how long the execution might take because this was a drug mixture that they hadn't used before. Now, in the 19 previous lethal injections, they say the average time between injection and death was typically 6 to 12 minutes. Reporting live in McAllister tonight, Max Resnick, 2 News works for you.
Thank you, Max. The Neiman family issued this statement about their daughter after the execution. She was the joy of our life. We are thankful this day has finally arrived and justice will be served. And Governor Mary Fallin issued this statement on tonight's execution. She said, I have asked the Department of Corrections to conduct a full review of Oklahoma's execution procedures to determine what happened and why during this evening's execution of Clayton Darrell Lockett.
Going in depth tonight, the intense legal battle leading up to tonight's executions began about 60 days ago and was brought on after European companies that produce pentobarbital banned U.S. prisons from using it. That led to a change of drug protocols. It all started February 25th. Attorneys for inmates Clayton Lockett and Charles Warner filed suit against the state, claiming the secrecy surrounding the executions keeps the courts from determining whether the punishment is cruel and unusual. On March 14th, a bombshell as the DOC says they don't have enough drugs for the executions. A week later, March 21st, the DOC gives the prison wardens the option of choosing from 5 different drug combinations. Attorneys for Lockett and Warner challenged that. On April 21st, the Oklahoma Supreme Court stayed the executions for both Lockett and Warner, but 2 days later, April 23rd, the Oklahoma Supreme Court ruled again, this time saying that the state can keep the details about the drugs used in executions secret. And that set the stage for the April 29th executions of both Lockett and Warner.
Now, in April of 2008, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled lethal injection is not cruel and unusual punishment. Still, there have been problems with it in the past. Most often, much like tonight's case, a vein is missed. In one 2006 case out of Florida, it took 30 minutes for a prison employee to locate the condemned man's vein. In that case, there were severe chemical burns, and it took 34 minutes for the prisoner to die. Now, one of the most recent cases happened in Ohio. It's the story of Dennis McGuire. He was put to death on January 16th of this year. His family is now suing, saying that he made loud snorting noises and it took 25 minutes for him to die. A normal execution, as Max mentioned, lasts about 12 minutes and is relatively silent. And like here in Oklahoma, the drug combination was different than usual and untested because supplies of the old formula had dried up.
So how does an execution fail? Tonight we reached out to a medical expert for perspective. Dr. Jonathan Groner joins us now via Skype from Ohio, from The Ohio State University. And the question is, you know, prisons like the one here in Oklahoma are now having to change some of the drugs that they use in executions. Obviously, you weren't there. You weren't part of this event. But in your opinion, was the failure due to the drugs that they're using, or is this more of how it's being administered?
Well, I think it's actually both. There was definitely a problem with the IV from everything that I've read about the execution, but there's also a problem with the drugs, that the combination that they use doesn't really have an anesthetic in it. It has a sedative and then a paralyzing agent and then potassium chloride to stop the heart. So the thing that we would use in the operating room for general anesthesia, such as a high-dose narcotic or general anesthetic, is actually missing.
You know, obviously there's the issue there in Ohio that we mentioned. From your perspective, can these issues be solved for states like Ohio and Oklahoma? And if so, how?
Well, the answer is no. I mean, the problem is there's a conflict that can't be resolved, and that the people who are most expert at using these drugs and putting these IVs in are ethically forbidden from participating in execution. So that's a sort of a paradox that can't be resolved. So unless you're going to bring anesthesiologists into the death chamber to do that, but they are not willing to do that for obvious moral and ethical reasons.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Dr. Jonathan Groner, thanks for your perspective tonight. And our coverage of tonight's failed execution continues online. We've populated KJRH.com with several news stories, plus a full background on both Lockett and Warner, as well as the victims' families.
You can't keep a good person down. So who knows, it may re-rise and we'll be stronger and better than anybody.
Baxter Rising, the slogan for the 4,200 people in the community just over the Oklahoma border in Kansas as they clean up after Sunday's EF2 tornado. 2 News reporter Liz Bryant is there live tonight where people use daylight to push forward. Liz?
It's curfew now here in Baxter Springs, Kansas, a town rising from this rubble. I'm only seeing law enforcement drive around, and they're really driving around. Other than that, it's quiet and it's dark, but don't let that fool you, because today 542 people volunteered in this tornado debris.
It's just people of Baxter coming together.
Baxter Rising.
Rising back up to help get this town back in its order.
From the electricity going back up to the people sweeping forward.
This has been my home for the past 11 years.
Johnny Redden cleans scrap off this street. Every push, he's thinking about his friend Clinton.
Because all he had after he lost his dad in 2009 was his house and his car. And both of those got taken away.
Up the street at 417, another John, who always wanted a skylight and to knock down a few walls, but never had this in mind.
I've been saying for years I want to move away, you know, but after what I've been through the last 48 hours, I don't think I'll ever move away.
See, 48 hours ago, John's 2 teenagers inside here only 3 minutes before the tornado hit. They got in the car, sped 60 miles an hour down side streets, all to get away.
Here we are, less than a week from high school graduation. And I'm going, okay, what do? Do I plan a funeral?
As for Johnny, a clean street means a clean slate for Baxter.
We can rise up out of this, then that'll show how strong of a community we are. And
Johnny, all
honestly,
the volunteers, the contractors, the insurance agents, everyone must register and get a tag like this. It's so officials can put a detailed report together and make sure they get all the FEMA money they can. Live in Baxter Springs tonight, I'm Liz Bryant. 2 News works for you.
Thank you, Liz. Now, 2 News has been flooded with calls and email from those of you who are wondering how you can help the tornado victims. The Salvation Army and the American Red Cross are both accepting donations. An easy way to give $10 is to text Red Cross to 90999. You can also find links, phone numbers, and the addresses of relief groups that are working there on our website, KJRH.com.
Now, there was not a tornado warning issued at the time the twister hit Quapaw and the surrounding communities. Today, 2 News went to the National Weather Service and asked some tough questions to get the answers you deserve. Steve Piltz, the meteorologist in charge, says that tornadoes generally form thousands of feet in the air. This tornado, however, formed at the cloud base right over Quapaw, doing damage almost immediately.
It's not rare, but most often luck is with you, and it happens in a field first, or it happens far enough away from town where a spotter will see it.
Pilt says that he and his team will review what happened Sunday, looking for ways to improve on future predictions.
Well, this was a cloudy and cold day here in Green Country. We were all wondering, when are those spring temperatures going to come back, Brett?
Yeah, I looked at the calendar 3 or 4 times to make sure it didn't say October. It indeed says late April. We should be warming up, and today we had afternoon temperatures in the lower 50s. The clouds still out there, the rain, very few rain showers across the area have eroded. They are gone. Down to the southeast, it's still been a stormy night from Atlanta to the Gulf Coast, not as tornadic as it was last night. Still, though, some tornado reports down in the deep south and parts of Mississippi, Alabama, now moving into western Georgia. Tomorrow morning, we'll have a chilly breeze, variably cloudy skies at a temperature around 43. Coming up in weather, we're going to talk about how we're going to have more sunshine than we had today. A frosty night tomorrow night for some of us, but a big weekend warm-up. 290s in the forecast? Find out in the 7-day forecast.
All right. It was 75 when I left California this afternoon, 54 when I got off the plane.
Yeah, a little chilly here today.
Definitely. Well, it's something that kids use every day, school crosswalks.
And with the city trying to tighten its belt, could those crossing guards who help protect your child disappear?
And People magazine named him the sexiest man alive. I met Adam Levine on the red carpet to talk about The Voice. You're watching 2 News. Works for you at 10.